Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist. Tonight we're stepping into the forest, into the green cathedral of leaves and light, where ancient giants stand rooted in soil older than memory. We'll walk beneath canopies that have sheltered countless generations, explore the hidden networks beneath our feet, and discover how these quiet realms of wood and shadow breathe life into our planet. Forests are more than collections of trees, they're living systems, communities of organisms bound together in ways both visible and invisible, speaking a language we're only beginning to understand. So settle in, let the rustle of leaves calm your thoughts, and allow the gentle wisdom of the woods to carry you toward rest. And just before we begin, if these calm, curious explorations help you unwind or give you a quiet way to end your day, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too. One sleepy soul at a time. The story of the forest begins. Long before humans walked the earth, forests covered the land in green. The story begins hundreds of millions of years ago, when plants first ventured from water onto shore. They were small at first, hugging the ground, surviving in the thin margin between sea and stone. But life, as it does, adapted. Stems grew taller, reaching for sunlight. Roots pushed deeper, anchoring into soil. Leaves spread wider, capturing more energy. Over vast stretches of time, these pioneer plants became trees, woody giants that could stand against wind and weather, that could grow for centuries, accumulating mass and height in ways their ancestors never could. The first forests were strange by today's standards, populated by tree ferns and primitive conifers, inhabitants of a world still finding its form. But they transformed the planet. They changed the atmosphere, enriched the soil, created habitats for emerging life. Forests became cradles of evolution, places where countless species found shelter, food, and opportunity. The story of forests is inseparable from the story of life itself. They grew together, shaped each other, created the living world we inherit. Every forest today carries echoes of those ancient beginnings. The green heart of the earth. If you could see Earth from space, the forests would appear as vast patches of green draped across the continents. These are the planet's living tissues, its lungs and circulatory system combined. Forests cover roughly 30% of the land's surface, from the frozen taiga of the north to the steaming rainforests of the equator. Each is unique, adapted to its climate, home to distinct communities of life, yet all share fundamental qualities. They anchor soil, preventing erosion. They store water, releasing it gradually into rivers and atmosphere. They moderate temperature, creating microclimates cooler and more humid than surrounding areas. Most importantly, they cycle carbon, pulling it from the air during growth, storing it in wood and soil, maintaining a balance that helps regulate Earth's climate. Without forests, the planet would be dramatically different. Deserts would expand, soil would wash away, the atmosphere would hold more carbon, trapping more heat. Rivers would run differently, floods would be more severe. The green heart of Earth is not ornamental, it's functional, essential, pumping nutrients and water through ecosystems, maintaining conditions that make complex life possible. Forests are infrastructure, built by biology over deep time, supporting everything that depends on stable, habitable conditions. The first trees on the planet. The earliest trees appeared during the Devonian period, roughly 380 million years ago. They were unlike modern trees, more alien in form, simpler in structure. Archaeopteris, one of the first, grew up to 30 meters tall with a woody trunk and fern-like leaves. It couldn't produce seeds yet, reproducing by spores like its fern ancestors. These proto-forests were sparse compared to later woodlands, but they were revolutionary. For the first time, tall plants created vertical structure in ecosystems, shade beneath their canopy, and vast quantities of organic material that accumulated and eventually formed coal deposits. Another early tree, Lepidodendron, dominated Carboniferous swamps. Its trunk was covered in diamond-shaped leaf scars, giving it a scaled appearance. These trees grew rapidly in the warm, wet climate, sometimes reaching 40 meters. When they died and fell into oxygen-poor swamp water, they didn't fully decay. Instead, they accumulated in massive deposits that, buried and compressed over millions of years, became the coal beds we mine today. Those ancient forests literally changed the planet's chemistry, pulling so much carbon from the atmosphere that oxygen levels soared and global temperatures dropped. The first trees were architects of a new Earth, reshaping geology and climate through their simple act of growing. The evolution of forest life. As forests evolved, so did the life within them. Early forests were relatively simple: trees, primitive insects, millipedes, and early amphibians. But as trees diversified, so did the creatures that depended on them. Insects evolved to exploit every niche: bark beetles boring into wood, caterpillars consuming leaves, pollinators visiting flowers. With insects came insect eaters, spiders, lizards, and eventually birds. Mammals emerged and adapted to forest life, some climbing into the canopy, others burrowing beneath roots. Each species shaped the forest, even as the forest shaped it. Birds dispersed seeds, sometimes carrying them kilometers from parent trees. Fungi formed partnerships with roots, trading minerals for sugars. Bacteria fixed nitrogen, enriching soil. Predators controlled herbivore populations, preventing overgrazing. Over millions of years, forests became intricate webs of interdependence, each organism connected to dozens of others in relationships of competition, cooperation, and coexistence. This complexity makes forests resilient. Remove one species and others compensate, but it also makes them vulnerable to rapid, widespread disruption. The evolution of forest life is ongoing, species still adapting to changing conditions, filling new niches, responding to challenges. Forests aren't static museums of ancient life. They're dynamic communities, constantly evolving, always becoming something new while carrying forward the legacy of their deep past. The forests that shaped civilization. Human history is intertwined with forests. Early humans lived in and around woodlands, gathering fruits and nuts, hunting forest animals, using wood for fire and tools. As societies developed, forests provided materials for building, timber for homes and ships, charcoal for metalworking. Entire civilizations rose on forest resources. The cedars of Lebanon built temples and palaces across the ancient Middle East. European oak forests became the navies that explored the world. Forests also shaped culture and mythology. They were places of mystery and danger in stories, home to spirits and monsters, settings for transformation and discovery. Sacred groves served as temples. Kings reserved forests for hunting, making them symbols of power. The relationship wasn't always sustainable. Many ancient forests were cleared for agriculture or timber, their loss sometimes contributing to civilization's decline. The Fertile Crescent, once forested, became the arid landscape we see today, partly through deforestation and soil degradation. Yet forests also sustained societies for millennia, when managed wisely. Some cultures developed practices that allowed harvest without destruction, recognizing forests as renewable resources requiring care. The forests that remain have witnessed human history, standing as silent observers while empires rose and fell at their edges. They're older than our cities, remembering times before we arrived. The breath of the planet. Forests breathe, though not like animals do. During daylight, trees pull carbon dioxide from the air through tiny pores in their leaves called stomata, inside cells containing chlorophyll. This carbon is combined with water to create sugars, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This is the breath of the forest, invisible exhalation that fills the atmosphere with the oxygen we need. At night, the process reverses partially. Trees continue respiring, consuming oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide, but the net effect over a full cycle is positive. Forests produce more oxygen than they consume. A single large tree might produce enough oxygen for 2 people in a year. Multiply that by the billions of trees and forests worldwide, and you understand their role as the planet's lungs. But it's more than just oxygen production. By absorbing carbon dioxide, forests help regulate atmospheric carbon levels. Their carbon sinks, storing carbon in their wood roots and the soil around them. Old-growth forests store enormous amounts of carbon accumulated over centuries. When forests are cut or burned, this stored carbon returns to the atmosphere, contributing to climate change. The breath of the forest maintains a balance that makes the planet habitable, cycling gases that would otherwise accumulate to harmful levels. The air we breathe comes from trees. Take a breath. A significant portion of the oxygen filling your lungs came from trees. Forests, along with ocean phytoplankton, are responsible for producing most of Earth's breathable atmosphere. This isn't just a current phenomenon. It's been true for hundreds of millions of years. The oxygen we breathe today is the product of countless generations of photosynthesizing organisms, accumulating over deep time. Ancient forests created the oxygen-rich atmosphere that allowed large animals to evolve. The air we consider normal would have been toxic to early life, which evolved in an atmosphere dominated by nitrogen and carbon dioxide. Plants transformed that atmosphere, tree by tree, leaf by leaf, through the patient work of photosynthesis. The process continues today. Every tree is a small factory, converting sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide into energy and oxygen. The scale is staggering. Earth's forests contain roughly 3 trillion trees, each contributing to the atmospheric balance. The connection is direct and immediate. The oxygen molecule you just inhaled might have been released by a tree moments ago or decades ago, circulating through the atmosphere until drawn into your lungs. We're breathing the exhalation of forests, participating in an exchange that links us directly to the green world, the hidden world beneath the canopy. Look up into a forest, and you see leaves and branches, shafts of sunlight filtering through green. But the canopy is just the visible surface of a much deeper world. Beneath those leaves exists a complex vertical structure, each layer home to different communities of life. The canopy itself is the highest realm, where treetops spread their leaves to capture maximum sunlight. It's a sunny, windy place, where leaves are smaller and tougher to resist drying. Below that, the understory consists of smaller trees and large shrubs, adapted to survive in reduced light. Their leaves are typically larger, arranged to capture whatever sunlight filters down. Lower still, the shrub layer contains woody plants that rarely exceed a few meters in height. Below that, the herb layer, ferns, wildflowers, and grasses. Finally, the forest floor, carpeted with fallen leaves and decorated with fungi. Each layer supports different species. Canopy-dwelling birds and insects rarely descend to the forest floor. Ground-dwelling mammals seldom climb into the canopy. Each has adapted to its vertical niche, exploiting resources available at that height. This layering creates habitat diversity, allowing more species to coexist than if the forest were a single uniform layer. Its architecture, built by biology, creating countless niches through the simple act of growing at different heights. The layers of the forest. Imagine walking into a mature forest. The first thing you notice is the shift in light. It's dimmer, cooler, filtered through countless leaves. You're entering a structured environment, as complex as any building. At your feet, the forest floor is a world of decomposition and renewal, where last year's leaves break down into soil, where fungi, fruit, and insects scurry. Reach up, and you're in the herb layer. Wildflowers bloom here in spring, before trees leaf out, rushing to complete their cycle in the brief window of abundant light. Higher still is the shrub layer, tangles of woody plants, forming dense understory, providing cover for ground-nesting birds and shelter for deer. Above that, small trees reach upward, waiting for gaps in the canopy where they might grow tall. The understory is dim, quiet, a place of patience. Then comes the canopy itself, often 20 to 40 meters overhead, a living ceiling where most of the forest's leaves capture sunlight, where birds nest and insects thrive. In tropical forests, there may even be an emergent layer, scattered giants that poke above the main canopy, their crowns in full sun. This vertical complexity is what makes forests so rich in species. It's not just area that matters, but volume, three-dimensional space that can be divided and subdivided into countless niches. The roots that bind the earth. What you see above ground is only half the tree. Below the surface spreads an equally complex root system, sometimes extending far beyond the reach of branches. Roots serve multiple purposes. They anchor the tree, resisting wind and preventing toppling. They absorb water and dissolved minerals from soil. They store carbohydrates during dormant seasons. And crucially, they hold soil in place, preventing erosion. In their absence, rain washes soil away, turning fertile land into barren rock. Forest soils are often thin, but incredibly rich, built over centuries by falling leaves and decaying wood. Tree roots stabilize this soil, their fine rootlets penetrating between particles, larger roots creating a framework that binds everything together. On slopes, forests prevent landslides. Along rivers, tree roots stabilize banks, preventing collapse and filtering runoff. The relationship between trees and soil is reciprocal. Trees create and enrich soil through their litter, while soil provides the medium trees need for growth. Remove the trees and the soil may follow, washing or blowing away within years. Some of Earth's great deserts were once forested, their soil long since lost after trees were cleared. The roots that bind the earth are invisible but essential, holding together the thin layer of fertility that makes terrestrial life possible. The mycelium network below. Beneath the forest floor, invisible to casual observation, stretches a network as complex as any city's infrastructure. This is the mycelium, thread-like fungal structures that weave through soil, connecting tree to tree in what scientists call the wood wide web. These fungal networks are more than mere decomposers. They form partnerships with tree roots called mycorrhizae. The fungi colonize the root tips, extending the tree's reach far beyond what its roots alone could access. Through the fungal threads, the tree gains access to water and nutrients from a much larger volume of soil. The fungi deliver phosphorus, nitrogen, and other minerals directly to the tree. In exchange, the tree provides the fungi with sugars produced through photosynthesis, carbohydrates the fungi can't make themselves, but it goes further. The mycelium network physically connects multiple trees. Nutrients and even chemical signals can travel through these connections. A tree under attack by insects might send warning signals through the network, allowing neighboring trees to activate defenses. Older trees have been observed sharing resources with younger ones through these connections, sometimes favoring their own offspring. The forest floor contains more fungal biomass than the trees above contain wood. This hidden network is fundamental to how forests function, creating a communication and resource-sharing system that blurs the boundaries between individual organisms. The silent communication of trees. Trees communicate, though not with sounds or gestures. Their language is chemical, electrical, and fungal, subtle signals exchanged through air, soil, and the mycelium network. When a tree is attacked by insects, it produces defensive chemicals that make its leaves less palatable. But it also releases volatile organic compounds into the air, chemical signals that neighboring trees detect. Those neighbors then begin producing defensive compounds preemptively, preparing for the attack before insects arrive. The signaling is specific. Trees can distinguish between different threats and respond appropriately through root connections and associated fungi. Trees share resources. A struggling tree might receive carbon from healthier neighbors. Mother trees, large old trees at the center of fungal networks, have been observed nurturing their offspring, directing more resources toward their own seedlings. Trees can even recognize their relatives, competing less aggressively with kin than with unrelated neighbors. The forest is not a collection of individuals competing mindlessly for resources. It's a community with patterns of cooperation, communication, even what might be called care. This doesn't require consciousness in any human sense. It's the result of evolution favoring mechanisms that improve survival, selected over millions of years. But it fundamentally changes how we should view forests, not as timber resources, but as interconnected communities. The forest is a living system. A forest is greater than the sum of its trees. It's an ecosystem, a community of organisms interacting with each other and their physical environment, exchanging energy and materials in complex cycles. Energy enters through sunlight, captured by leaves and converted into chemical energy. This flows through the system as plants are eaten by herbivores, herbivores by predators, and everything eventually by decomposers. Nutrients cycle differently. They're not lost, but recycled. A leaf falls, decomposes, its minerals absorbed by roots and incorporated into new growth. A tree dies, fungi and bacteria break it down, and its substance becomes soil that nurtures the next generation. Water cycles through as well, absorbed by roots, pulled up through trunks, released from leaves into the atmosphere, falling again as rain. The forest creates its own weather, its own soil, its own conditions for life. Remove too many components, and the system degrades. Without decomposers, dead material accumulates and nutrients lock up. Without predators, herbivores may overgraze. Without trees, the microclimate changes and species, adapted to forest conditions, disappear. The stability comes from complexity. Thousands of species, millions of interactions, creating redundancy and resilience. A healthy forest can absorb disturbances, whether fire, storm, or disease, and recover because the system remains intact. This is the key insight of ecology. Everything connects. Nothing exists in isolation. The balance of light and shade. In a forest, light is currency. Trees compete for it, reaching upward, spreading leaves to capture more. But light is unevenly distributed. The canopy receives full sun, while the forest floor may receive only 1% of the light hitting the treetops. Life at each level adapts to its light environment. Canopy leaves are smaller, tougher, arranged to handle intense light without overheating. They can photosynthesize at high rates. When sun is abundant, forest floor plants have the opposite problem. Light is scarce and precious. Their leaves are larger, thinner, packed with chlorophyll to capture every available photon. They photosynthesize slowly but efficiently, adapted to survive on minimal light. Some plants have found clever solutions. Shade-tolerant species can survive years or decades in deep shade, growing slowly, waiting for opportunity. When a tree falls and creates a gap, these waiting plants race upward, competing to fill the opening. Light-demanding pioneer species can't germinate in shade, but explode into growth when they find a gap, quickly colonizing disturbed areas. The balance between light and shade creates niches for different strategies, allowing diverse species to coexist. Forests are studies in light economy. Every leaf positioned to maximize return on investment. Every plant adapted to its particular light environment. The process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is perhaps the most important chemical reaction on Earth. It's elegantly simple in concept, fiendishly complex in execution. Inside leaf cells, within structures called chloroplasts, light energy is captured by chlorophyll, the green pigment that gives leaves their color. This energy is used to split water molecules, separating hydrogen from oxygen. The oxygen is released into the air. The hydrogen is combined with carbon dioxide, absorbed from the atmosphere through leaf pores, to create simple sugars. These sugars are the building blocks for everything else the tree needs: cellulose for cell walls, proteins for enzymes, oils for seeds. The process isn't perfectly efficient. Only a few percent of incoming light energy is converted into chemical energy, but it's sufficient to power nearly all life on Earth. Every animal ultimately depends on photosynthesis, either eating plants directly or eating animals that ate plants. The oxygen in our atmosphere is a waste product of this process, accumulated over billions of years. Photosynthesis is ancient, first evolved by bacteria over 3 billion years ago, refined through countless iterations, eventually incorporated into plants. It's solar power at the molecular level, capturing the energy radiating from our star and making it available to life. Without photosynthesis, Earth would be a barren rock orbiting the sun. The creation of oxygen and life. Oxygen wasn't always abundant in Earth's atmosphere. The early Earth had almost none. Anaerobic bacteria thrived in that ancient world, but they couldn't support complex life. Everything changed when photosynthesizing organisms evolved. At first, cyanobacteria in the oceans produced oxygen, but it was immediately consumed by reacting with iron and other elements. For hundreds of millions of years, oxygen production simply oxidized available materials, creating rust-colored sediments called banded iron formations. Eventually, around 2 billion years ago, the reactive materials were saturated. Oxygen began accumulating in the atmosphere. This was catastrophic for anaerobic life. Oxygen was toxic to them. It's called the Great Oxidation Event, perhaps the first major extinction caused by life itself. But oxygen opened new possibilities. Aerobic respiration extracts far more energy from food than anaerobic processes, allowing more complex, energy-intensive life forms to evolve. Over hundreds of millions of years, plants colonized land and oxygen levels rose further. By 300 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period, oxygen reached 35%, higher than today's 21%. Insects grew enormous in that oxygen-rich atmosphere. Eventually, levels stabilized near modern concentrations. The oxygen we breathe is a gift from ancient photosynthesizers and is constantly replenished by forests and phytoplankton. Life created the conditions for its own diversification. The water cycle of the woods. Forests are intimately connected to water. They capture it, store it, release it, and purify it, acting as living watersheds. When rain falls on forest canopy, some is intercepted by leaves and evaporates directly. More drips to the forest floor, where spongy soil absorbs it, rather than letting it run off. Tree roots draw water up from soil, sometimes from meters deep, pulling it through the trunk and releasing it from leaves in a process called transpiration. A single large tree might transpire hundreds of liters daily. This water vapor rises, cools, condenses into clouds, and falls again as rain. Forests essentially recycle water, maintaining humidity and generating local rainfall. Deforested areas often become drier as this cycle breaks. The water that doesn't evaporate percolates through soil, filtered by sand and organic matter, emerging in springs and streams far cleaner than when it fell as rain. Forests protect watersheds, providing clean water to communities downstream. They also moderate water flow, absorbing rain during storms and releasing it gradually, preventing both floods and droughts. Rivers flowing through forested regions tend to be more stable, less prone to extreme fluctuations. The relationship between forests and water is symbiotic. Forests need water, but they also create conditions that increase its availability, maintaining the humid environments they require. The trees that make rain. In the Amazon rainforest, trees don't just respond to rainfall, they create it. The forest transpires enormous volumes of water daily, releasing moisture into the atmosphere. This water vapor rises, cools, and condenses into clouds that produce rain. The rain falls on the forest, is absorbed, transpired again, and the cycle continues. Scientists estimate that water molecules are recycled 5 to 6 times as they move across the Amazon basin, blown westward from the Atlantic by prevailing winds. This means much of the rain falling deep in the interior isn't direct from the ocean. it's recycled by the forest itself. The trees are making their own weather. This has profound implications. If significant portions of the forest are cleared, this cycle breaks. Less transpiration means less rainfall, which stresses remaining trees, which reduces transpiration further. A feedback loop toward desiccation. Evidence suggests parts of the Amazon are approaching a tipping point where deforestation could trigger a transition from rainforest to savanna. Other tropical forests show similar patterns. The Congo Basin, Southeast Asian rainforests, all participate in creating their own rainfall through transpiration. Trees aren't passive inhabitants of wet climates. In many cases, they actively maintain those conditions, creating the environment they need to survive. The relationship between forests and climate is bidirectional, complex, and still being understood. The forest as a climate regulator. Forests regulate climate at multiple scales. Locally, they create microclimates, cooler, more humid conditions beneath their canopy. The shade reduces ground temperature. Transpiration cools the air like natural air conditioning. Forests even influence wind patterns, slowing surface winds while creating convection currents that lift moisture into the atmosphere. Regionally, forests affect rainfall patterns and temperature across hundreds or thousands of kilometers. The moisture recycling in the Amazon influences weather as far away as the southern United States. Globally, forests play a crucial role in carbon cycling. They store roughly 3 times as much carbon as currently exists in the entire atmosphere. When forests grow, they pull carbon from the air, mitigating climate change. When they burn or are cleared, they release that stored carbon, accelerating warming. Forests also affect Earth's albedo, how much sunlight the surface reflects. Dark forest canopy absorbs more heat than lighter-colored grassland or agricultural land. In tropical regions, the cooling effect of carbon storage outweighs the warming from reduced albedo. In boreal forests near the poles, the calculation is more complex. But overall, forests are climate regulators, moderating temperature and rainfall, storing carbon that would otherwise warm the atmosphere. They're part of Earth's thermostat, helping maintain conditions suitable for life. The role of forests in cooling the planet. As Earth warms, forests become increasingly important as cooling mechanisms. Their role is multifaceted. First, carbon sequestration. Growing trees absorb carbon dioxide, the primary greenhouse gas, incorporating carbon into wood and increasing the amount stored in soil. A single tree might sequester 22 kilograms of carbon per year. Multiply by billions of trees, and the numbers become significant. Tropical forests are particularly important. They grow year-round and store enormous amounts of carbon in their biomass. Second, evapotranspiration provides physical cooling. The energy required to evaporate water is drawn from the environment, cooling the air. This is measurable. Temperatures in forested areas can be 5 to 10 degrees cooler than nearby deforested areas. Third, forests produce aerosols, tiny particles released from leaves that serve as condensation nuclei for clouds. More clouds mean more sunlight, reflected back to space before it can warm the surface. Finally, forests protect permafrost in northern regions. Where forests have been cleared from Arctic areas, permafrost thaws faster, releasing stored methane and carbon dioxide, potent greenhouse gases. The forest shade and insulation slow this process. Protecting existing forests and expanding forest cover are recognized as important climate mitigation strategies. They're not the only solution. Reducing emissions remains crucial, but they're part of the answer. A natural technology honed over millions of years. The Amazon, lungs of the world. The Amazon rainforest is Earth's largest tropical forest, covering over 5 million square kilometers across 9 countries. It contains 10% of all species on Earth, including 40,000 plant species, over 1,400 bird species, and 400 mammals. The forest holds roughly 90 billion tons of carbon in its trees, equivalent to a decade of global human emissions. It produces 20% of Earth's oxygen, though it also consumes much of that in respiration. The lungs of the world metaphor, while poetic, isn't quite accurate. The Amazon's greater importance is in carbon storage and rainfall generation. The river that gives the forest its name is itself remarkable. It discharges more water than the next 7 largest rivers combined, carrying water transpired and precipitated over thousands of kilometers of forest. The Amazon basin is a powerhouse of biological productivity, a vast chemical factory where sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide are converted into living tissue at staggering rates. But it's under threat. Deforestation has claimed about 17% of the forest, mostly for cattle ranching and agriculture. The remaining forest shows signs of stress, more frequent droughts, increased tree mortality. Scientists worry about reaching a tipping point beyond which the forest can't sustain itself, potentially transitioning to savanna. What happens in the Amazon affects global climate, making its protection a planetary priority. The great rainforests of the tropics. Tropical rainforests circle the equator in a green belt, the Amazon in South America, the Congo Basin in Africa, rainforests in Southeast Asia and Oceania. These forests share characteristics. They're warm year-round, receive abundant rainfall, support extraordinary biodiversity, and are structured in complex vertical layers. They're the most biodiverse terrestrial ecosystems on Earth. A single hectare of Amazon rainforest might contain more tree species than all of North America. This diversity results from stable climate, ancient age, and complex structure, creating countless niches. Tropical rainforests are old. Some have existed for tens of millions of years, giving evolution time to elaborate. Species have specialized to incredible degrees. Specific pollinators for specific flowers, trees whose seeds only germinate in specific conditions, animals that eat only certain fruits. This specialization creates vulnerability. Remove one species, and those dependent on it may follow. Despite their lush appearance, tropical rainforests often grow on poor soils. The nutrients are locked in living biomass, cycling rapidly from dead material back into living organisms. The soil itself may be little more than sand and clay. Remove the forest and fertility disappears within years. These forests are marvels of efficiency, recycling nutrients with minimal loss, creating maximum biomass from limited resources. The diversity of tropical life. Walk through a tropical rainforest, and you're surrounded by life in overwhelming abundance. Thousands of species of trees, many still unnamed by science. Vines thick as cables, hanging from branches, orchids and bromeliads growing on every surface, butterflies flashing iridescent blue. Somewhere in the canopy, howler monkeys call. A toucan flashes past, improbably large beak, brilliant against green. Leaf-cutter ants march in columns along the forest floor, carrying leaf fragments to underground fungus gardens. Poison dart frogs, bright as jewels, hop among fallen leaves. At night, the forest transforms. Different creatures emerge. Bats navigate by echolocation, hunting insects and pollinating flowers. Moths visit night-blooming plants. Ocelots prowl. Fungi glow with bioluminescence. The diversity is overwhelming, humbling. Most species remain unknown to science. Insects especially. Estimates suggest tropical forests contain millions of species yet to be described. Every tree might host dozens of species found nowhere else. This diversity isn't decorative, it's functional. Each species plays roles in the ecosystem, pollinating plants, dispersing seeds, controlling populations of other species. The complexity creates stability. With so many species, the loss of one causes less disruption than in simpler ecosystems. But there's a limit. Lose too many, and the system degrades, losing function, losing resilience. The diversity of tropical forests is a treasure, irreplaceable, and increasingly threatened. the song of insects and birds. A tropical forest is never silent. The soundscape is rich, layered, constantly changing. During the day, birds dominate, hundreds of species calling, singing, announcing territories, attracting mates. Some calls are melodious, others harsh or strange. The three-wattled bellbird's call sounds like a hammer striking metal. Parrots screech raucously in flocks. Toucans make mechanical-sounding croaks. Beneath the bird's song runs a constant hum of insects. Cicadas create waves of sound that rise and fall. Crickets chirp. Bees buzz around flowers. Mosquitoes whine. Each sound occupies its own frequency range, creating a complex acoustic environment where dozens of species can communicate simultaneously without drowning each other out. The sounds serve purposes: attracting mates, defending territories, warning of predators. Some insects use sound to echolocate, clicking to navigate in darkness. Some communicate through vibrations in leaves, inaudible to human ears, but clear to their intended audience. At dusk, the day shift gives way to night creatures. Frog choruses begin, dozens of species, each with distinctive calls, creating cacophonies that can be deafening. Nightjars call with repetitive, haunting notes. Insects continue their hum. The forest is a symphony, unwritten, ongoing, a performance that has continued for millions of years. The hidden mammals of the canopy. Most rainforest mammals never touch the ground. They're canopy specialists, adapted for life in the treetops. Monkeys are the most diverse howlers, with prehensile tails that function as fifth limbs, allowing them to hang while feeding. Spider monkeys, swinging arm over arm through branches with astonishing agility. Capuchins, using tools to crack nuts. Sloths do the opposite, moving so slowly that algae grows in their fur, providing camouflage. They descend only weakly to defecate, a dangerous journey when they're vulnerable to predators. Tree-dwelling mammals show specific adaptations. Many have prehensile tails for grasping branches. Some can glide. Flying squirrels and sugar gliders stretch membranes between limbs to sail between trees. Bats, true flyers, are incredibly diverse in rainforests. Some eat fruit, some nectar, some insects, some even fish. Kinkajous, relatives of raccoons, have flexible ankles that rotate backward, allowing them to descend headfirst. Arboreal life requires specialized skills. Depth perception becomes crucial, judging distances between branches. Strong grips prevent fatal falls. Balance and agility must be extraordinary. These mammals see the forest from perspectives we rarely experience. A three-dimensional world where down is dangerous and the canopy highway connects distant trees. They're hidden in green, rarely seen from below, living complete lives without ever touching earth. The dance of monkeys and parrots. In tropical forests, monkeys and parrots often share the same trees, competing for fruit, but using different strategies. Monkeys with manipulative hands and strength can reach fruit parrots cannot, breaking open hard pods or tearing into tough-skinned fruit. Parrots, with powerful beaks, crack nuts and seeds. Monkeys struggle with. Sometimes they cooperate inadvertently. Monkeys feeding messily drop fruit scraps that parrots catch midair or retrieve from lower branches. Watching them is like watching a dance, each species moving through the canopy with characteristic style. Monkeys swing and leap, using tails and all four limbs, moving with liquid grace. Parrots fly between trees and flocks, land clumsily, then climb using beak and feet, looking almost comical compared to monkeys' elegance. But both are perfectly adapted to their niche. The relationship between frugivores and trees is mutualistic. Trees produce fruit specifically to attract animals that will eat them and disperse their seeds. The colorful fruit advertises ripeness. The nutritious pulp rewards consumption. The seeds pass through digestive systems unharmed, often scarified in ways that improve germination, then deposited far from the parent tree with a packet of fertilizer. Without monkeys and parrots, many trees couldn't reproduce effectively. Without fruit-bearing trees, these animals would starve. The dance is ancient, co-evolved, each partner shaping the other over millions of years. The nightlife of the rainforest. When darkness falls in the rainforest, it falls completely. The thick canopy blocks even starlight, creating blackness that is absolute. Yet the forest doesn't sleep. It shifts. Diurnal creatures retreat to roosts and nests. Nocturnal species emerge from hiding places. Bats pour from caves in clouds of flapping wings, navigating by echolocation, hunting insects, or visiting flowers. Many rainforest plants bloom at night, attracting bat pollinators with strong scents and pale flowers, visible in darkness. Moths emerge, some enormous with wingspan exceeding dinner plates, searching for nectar. Night-flying beetles blunder through the understory. On the forest floor, activity continues. Rodents forage, always alert for snakes and owls. Opossums, immune to many snake venoms, hunt fearlessly. Ocelots and jaguars prowl, silent as shadows. Amphibians become active. Tree frogs climb into the canopy to call and mate. Their chorus is overwhelming. Some species breed in water-filled bromeliads. High in trees, tiny pools become entire ecosystems. Predatory insects hunt on leaves and bark. Giant centipedes seeking prey. Assassin bugs stalking smaller insects. Spiders waiting in webs strung across paths. The forest at night is a different world. Familiar spaces transformed. Without sight, other senses dominate. The air feels thicker, laden with scents. Decay, flowers, musk. Sounds carry differently, seem closer. Occasional bioluminescence, glowing fungi, fireflies, even some click beetles, provides rare points of light in the darkness. The night shift is as busy as the day, just harder to witness. The glow of fungi and fireflies. In the darkest parts of the forest, certain organisms produce their own light. Bioluminescence, the chemical generation of light, appears in various species for different purposes. Fireflies are the most familiar, beetles that flash light from their abdomens in species-specific patterns, males advertising to females, each species with its own code. On warm nights, tropical forests can sparkle with thousands of synchronized flashes, entire trees pulsing with light as fireflies coordinate their displays. The mechanism is elegant. An enzyme called luciferase catalyzes a reaction that releases energy as light rather than heat, achieving efficiencies no human technology matches. Fungi also glow, though for less clear reasons. Certain mushrooms emit soft greenish light from their caps or mycelium, creating ghostly illumination on the forest floor. The glow may attract insects that help disperse spores, or it may be a metabolic accident with no particular purpose. Walking through a rainforest at night, you might see fallen logs glowing with foxfire, colonies of bioluminescent fungi colonizing dead wood. The light is faint, barely enough to read by, but in absolute darkness it's striking. Organic lanterns marking decay and renewal. These living lights remind us that life finds countless ways to solve problems, creating beauty as a byproduct. The temperate forests of the north move away from the equator, and tropical rainforests give way to temperate forests, woodlands that experience distinct seasons with cold winters and warm summers. These forests cover much of eastern North America, Europe, and Eastern Asia. They're less diverse than tropical forests, but still rich in species. Deciduous trees dominate: oaks, maples, beeches, birches that shed their leaves before winter. Some temperate forests are coniferous, dominated by pines, spruces, and firs that retain needles year-round. Others are mixed, combining both strategies. Temperate forests experience dramatic seasonal changes that tropical forests never know. Spring brings explosive growth as trees leaf out and wildflowers carpet the forest floor before the canopy closes. Summer is lush and green, thick with foliage and insect activity. Autumn transforms forests into tapestries of color as leaves change before falling. Winter is dormant, trees bare, many animals hibernating or migrating, the forest resting until spring. These seasonal rhythms shape everything: breeding times, migration patterns, hibernation schedules. Life in temperate forests must be adaptable, capable of surviving both feast and famine. The seasons create opportunities: abundant food in summer, harsh conditions in winter, selecting for different strategies than the constant climate of the tropics. Temperate forests are the woods of northern civilization, the forests most familiar to European and North American cultures. The colors of autumn leaves, one of nature's most spectacular displays, happens each autumn in temperate forests. Leaves that spent months green turn brilliant shades of yellow, orange, red, and purple before falling. The transformation isn't decoration, it's chemistry. Chlorophyll, the green pigment that dominates during the growing season, masks other pigments present in leaves. As days shorten and temperatures drop, trees prepare for winter. They stop producing chlorophyll and begin breaking down existing molecules to recover valuable nutrients before the leaves are shed. As green fades, other pigments reveal themselves. Carotenoids, present all along, show their yellow and orange hues. Anthocyanins, produced by some trees in autumn, create reds and purples. The specific colors depend on species and conditions. Maples produce brilliant reds. Aspens and birches turn golden yellow. Oaks shift to browns and russets. Weather affects intensity. Cool nights and sunny days enhance colors by promoting anthocyanin production. The display is brief, lasting weeks at most, as leaves complete their shutdown and fall. Those fallen leaves aren't waste. They're investment. Nutrients return to soil to be reabsorbed next spring. The colors are a side effect of this nutrient recovery, beautiful because of chemistry that serves essential purposes. Autumn is the forest preparing for winter, shutting down systems that would only be damaged by cold. The falling of seasons. Temperate forests exist in constant flux, cycling through seasons in rhythms that govern all life within. Spring is awakening. Sap rises, buds swell, leaves unfurl with surprising speed. The forest floor erupts in wildflowers, spring ephemerals that must complete their growth and reproduction before the canopy closes and shade deepens. Trilliums, bloodroot, spring beauties, carpet the ground in white and pink. Trees flower, many wind-pollinated, releasing clouds of pollen. Birds return from migration, establishing territories and nesting. Summer is growth, leaves fully expanded, photosynthesizing at maximum rate, converting sunlight into biomass. Trees thicken, adding annual growth rings. Young animals mature, the forest hums with activity. Autumn is preparation, trees withdrawing nutrients from leaves, squirrels caching nuts, birds fattening for migration or winter survival. Plants set seed, the pace slows. Winter is dormancy. Deciduous trees stand bare, their branches stark against sky. Snow may blanket the ground. Many animals hibernate, their metabolism slowing to minimal levels. Others remain active, adapted to find food in lean times. The forest seems dead, but isn't. It's resting, conserving energy, waiting. Deep in the soil and in protected buds, spring already exists in potential, ready to explode when conditions allow. The cycle has repeated for millions of years and will continue long after we're gone. The stillness of winter woods. There's a particular quality to winter forests, a quiet that's almost profound. Snow muffles sound, absorbing rather than reflecting it. With leaves gone and many animals dormant or departed, the soundscape simplifies. Wind whistles through bare branches. Ice-laden twigs crack and fall. A raven calls, harsh and solitary, but mostly silence. The stillness has weight, presence. Walk through winter woods, and you'll notice details invisible in other seasons. Tree bark becomes prominent. The shaggy texture of hickories, the smooth gray of beeches, the white patches of birches. Branch architecture stands revealed. each species with characteristic patterns. Bird nests, hidden during summer, appear as dark clumps in naked branches. Animal tracks mark the snow, deer trails, rabbit bounds, the paired prints of squirrels. You can read recent history in these tracks, seeing who passed and when. Winter transforms the forest into something spare, essential, stripped to structure. It's beautiful in a different way than summer's lushness, a minimalist beauty of line and form, and in that stillness, life persists. Beneath the snow, mice tunnel through leaf litter. Inside trees, dormant insects wait in crevices. Buds contain next spring's leaves, perfectly formed in miniature. The forest isn't dead. It's patient, enduring, waiting for the wheel to turn again. The renewal of spring. Spring in temperate forests feels like resurrection. As temperatures warm and daylight lengthens, dormancy breaks. It begins subtly, sap flowing in maples, tapped by those who know to collect it. Then more obviously, buds swelling on twigs, tight scales loosening. Suddenly within days, leaves begin emerging. The forest transforms almost visibly, green spreading up hillsides like a wave. This leafing follows patterns. Some species leaf early, others late. Willows and aspens are among the first. Oaks are cautious, waiting until frost danger passes. The sequence is predictable, refined by evolution to match each species' strategy and tolerance. With leaves come flowers. Some trees flower before leafing: maples, elms, poplars, taking advantage of wind pollination before leaves would interfere with pollen dispersal. Others flower after: apples, cherries, their showy blossoms attracting insect pollinators. The forest floor erupts in wild flowers, racing to complete their cycles before the canopy closes. Migrant birds return, suddenly filling the woods with song absent for months. Insects emerge from pupae and eggs. Frogs begin calling in vernal pools. Everything happens quickly, compressed into weeks. The forest has limited time to grow, reproduce, and prepare for next winter. Spring is urgency, life bursting forth, making up for lost time, celebrating the return of warmth and light. The growth of new shoots and blossoms. Watch a tree in spring, and you can almost see it grow. Shoots extend from twigs, lengthening visibly day by day. Leaves unfurl from buds, expanding as their cells inflate with water and multiply. The growth is fastest in the first weeks. A young tree might add several centimeters daily. This growth comes from energy stored during the previous season. The tree invested in roots and stored carbohydrates specifically for this burst of spring activity. It's spending saved resources to build new photosynthetic machinery that will repay the investment over the coming months. Blossoms appear with remarkable diversity. Wind-pollinated trees produce inconspicuous flowers, often dangling catkins that release clouds of pollen. Insect-pollinated trees produce showier displays. Cherry blossoms in clouds of pink and white, dogwood with large showy bracts, tulip poplars with nectar-filled flowers. Each strategy has advantages. Wind pollination works when many trees of the same species grow near each other and bloom simultaneously. Insect pollination allows more precise pollen delivery, but requires investment in nectar and petals. Some trees have evolved complex relationships with specific pollinators. The result is a springtime spectacle, the forest adorned with blossoms, alive with the business of reproduction, every tree participating in the ancient imperative to create the next generation. The old-growth forests of the world. Old-growth forests, stands that have developed without major human disturbance for centuries, are increasingly rare. They differ fundamentally from younger forests. The trees are massive, often centuries old, their canopies forming continuous cover. Multiple age classes exist. Ancient trees alongside younger ones that sprouted in gaps created when elders fell. Dead standing trees, called snags, provide crucial habitat for cavity-nesting birds and other species. Fallen logs litter the forest floor, slowly decomposing over decades, hosting fungi, insects, and seedlings. The soil is deep and rich, built over centuries of accumulation. Old-growth forests store more carbon than younger forests. Their massive trees and rich soil sequester enormous quantities. They're also more structurally complex, providing habitat diversity that supports more species. These forests have ecological memory, populations of species adapted to old-growth conditions that can't persist in younger stands. Old-growth forests once covered vast areas of the planet. Now they're fragments, remnants surviving in protected areas or remote regions. They're irreplaceable on human timescales. You can plant a forest, but you can't create old growth. That requires time measured in centuries. The remaining old-growth stands are precious, refuges for species, carbon stores, living libraries of ecological knowledge. They show us what forests can become given time and freedom from disturbance. The ancient giants of the earth. Among the oldest living organisms on Earth are trees. The oldest known individual is a bristlecone pine in California, over 4,800 years old, alive when the Egyptian pyramids were built. It has weathered millennia of storms, droughts, and climate shifts, recording each year in its growth rings. Other species achieve similar ages. Oaks can live over 1,000 years. Bald cypresses in the southern United States reach similar ages. Yews in Europe are ancient, some potentially several thousand years old, though difficult to date. These ancient trees are biological monuments, having witnessed the entire span of recorded history. They were seedlings when civilizations we now study in history books were at their peak. But age isn't just about individual years. It's about accumulated growth. Some trees, while not particularly old, are enormous. Coast redwoods in California reach over 100 meters tall. Giant sequoias, shorter but more massive, can weigh over 1,000 tons, the largest living organisms by mass. Eucalyptus in Australia, Sitka spruce in Alaska. Many species produce giants given favorable conditions and time. These ancient trees anchor ecosystems, providing resources for countless other species. Their cavities shelter animals. Their canopies support epiphyte communities. When they finally fall, they become nurse logs, their decaying bodies nourishing the next generation. The sequoias and redwoods. California's coastal mountains harbor biological marvels, groves of coast redwoods, the tallest trees on Earth, and giant sequoias, the most massive. Coast redwoods thrive in the fog belt, where summer mist provides moisture during California's dry season. They grow straight and tall, reaching heights over 100 meters, 30 stories tall. Their wood is naturally rot-resistant, allowing them to live over 2,000 years. The tallest known named Hyperion stands 116 meters tall, a living skyscraper. Inland, in the Sierra Nevada, grow giant sequoias, shorter than redwoods, but far more massive, with trunks 10 meters in diameter. General Sherman, the largest tree by volume, contains enough wood to build a small town. These trees are fire-adapted. Their thick, fibrous bark insulates them from flames, and fire clears competing vegetation while stimulating sequoia seed release. Both species were logged heavily, reduced to small fractions of their original range, but protected groves remain, allowing visitors to walk among giants, necks craning upward, gaining visceral understanding of just how large trees can grow, given time and favorable conditions. Standing among them is humbling. You're dwarfed, made small, given perspective on your place in the living world. These trees will likely outlive our civilization, continuing their slow growth for centuries more. The tallest living things. Trees can grow taller than any other organism. The height record belongs to coast redwoods at over 115 meters. But what limits tree height? The answer is physics. Trees must transport water from roots to leaves, fighting gravity. As height increases, the energy required to lift water increases. Trees use capillary action and evaporation from leaves to pull water upward, essentially a physical pump. but there are limits. At extreme heights, water tension becomes so great that air bubbles form in the xylem vessels, breaking the water column and preventing further transport. This embolism limits how tall trees can grow. Hydraulic limitations explain why the tallest trees grow in foggy environments. They can absorb moisture directly through leaves, reducing reliance on water pulled from roots. Structural limitations matter too. Taller trees face greater wind stress and require more energy invested in trunk strength rather than growth. Eventually, the cost exceeds the benefit. Most trees never approach theoretical height limits, but a few species in ideal conditions push the boundaries. Seeing the tallest trees inspires awe. They've achieved growth that seems to defy logic, pushing biology to its limits. They stand as monuments to what's possible, given deep time, favorable conditions, and the patient accumulation of growth, season after season, for centuries. The deep forests of Europe. Europe's forests are ancient in human terms, interwoven with culture and history. They're the dark woods of fairy tales, places of mystery and transformation. Most have been shaped by human activity for millennia, managed for timber, grazed by livestock, cleared and regrown repeatedly. True primeval forest is rare, surviving only in fragments like Białowieża Forest on the Poland-Belarus border. This remnant of the vast forest that once covered the European plain contains trees over 500 years old, including the continent's largest population of European bison. The forest types vary with latitude and elevation. Northern Europe has boreal forests of pine and spruce. Central Europe once featured extensive deciduous forests of oak, beech, and hornbeam. Mediterranean regions have evergreen oak woodlands adapted to hot, dry summers. Each forest type supported distinct communities: wolves and lynx in the north, brown bears in mountains, wild boar throughout. Many of these animals were extirpated, though some are now returning as rewilding efforts progress. European forests carry cultural weight. They were sacred to pre-Christian peoples. Druids revered oak groves. Germanic tribes held assemblies under ancient trees. Medieval forests were royal preserves. Literature is full of forests, from Greek mythology to Grimm's fairy tales. The forests have witnessed the entire arc of European history, silent observers of empires rising and falling at their edges. The myths and legends of trees. Cultures worldwide have woven trees into their mythology. Yggdrasil, the world tree of Norse myth, connected 9 realms, its roots reaching into underworlds, while its branches held the heavens. The tree of life appears in many traditions. Eden's forbidden tree, the Bodhi tree, under which Buddha achieved enlightenment, the sacred fig of Hinduism. Trees symbolize knowledge, immortality, connection between earth and sky. Individual trees become legendary. The oak of Mamre witnessed Abraham's covenant. Thor's oak was so sacred to Germanic pagans that its felling by Christian missionaries triggered cultural transformation. The charter oak in Connecticut supposedly hid colonial documents from British authorities. Some trees are worshipped: the baobabs of Africa, considered sacred, the ancient yews in European churchyards. Trees feature in countless folk tales: magic trees bearing golden apples, trees that grant wishes, trees that can speak and move. These stories reflect human relationships with forests: dependence, awe, fear. Trees provide food, shelter, fuel, but they also dominate the landscape, dwarf us, outlive us. They're the elders of the natural world, witnesses to generations of human lives. The myths we've created around trees express our attempt to understand our place in a world where these beings preceded us and will likely outlast us, standing silent and patient through the span of civilizations. The forests in ancient stories. Forest scenes appear repeatedly in ancient literature, always carrying symbolic weight. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero journeys to the cedar forest to prove his worth, ultimately slaying its guardian, an act with ecological consequences, suggesting ancient awareness of deforestation's impacts. Greek mythology placed sacred groves under divine protection. To harm such trees invited divine retribution, as Erysichthon discovered when he cut down trees in Demeter's grove, and was cursed with insatiable hunger. Roman writers lamented deforestation, even in their time. Pliny the Elder wrote of forests cleared from Italy's mountains, noting subsequent soil loss and flooding. Medieval romances set adventures in forests, places where normal rules didn't apply, where knights encountered magic and madness. The forest was liminal space, outside civilization, where transformation occurred. Shakespeare's forests, the Forest of Arden, the woods near Athens, are places where characters lose themselves to find truth. The pattern repeats across cultures. Forests as mysterious, dangerous, transformative. These stories shaped how people related to actual forests, viewing them with respect and wariness, but they also celebrated forests as refuges, wild spaces where one could escape society's constraints. The ancient stories reveal that humans have always had complicated relationships with forests, depending on them, fearing them, being shaped by them, shaping them in turn. The sacred groves of old civilizations. Many ancient cultures maintained sacred groves, forest areas, protected for religious purposes. In these spaces, trees couldn't be cut, animals couldn't be hunted. The groves belonged to gods. Classical Greece had numerous sacred groves, often associated with specific deities. Zeus's oak groves, Apollo's laurel groves. Roman law protected certain forests, prescribing severe penalties for violations. Celtic druids conducted rituals in oak groves, considering the trees and mistletoe growing on them particularly sacred. In India, sacred groves protected by religious taboos still exist, preserving biodiversity in densely populated regions. These groves often contain species extinct in surrounding areas, serving as accidental nature reserves. The concept appears worldwide. African tribes maintain sacred forests. Native American peoples protected certain groves. Pacific Islanders designated sacred trees. The sacredness served ecological functions, whether intended or not. Protected areas became refuges for wildlife, maintained seed sources, prevented total deforestation. In modern terms, sacred groves were early protected areas, conservation driven by spiritual rather than scientific motivation, but achieving similar results. The practice shows that humans have long recognized that some places should remain untouched, that not all land should be exploited, that there's value in maintaining wild spaces. The spiritual and ecological are intertwined in ways we're only beginning to reappreciate. The symbolism of trees across cultures. Trees carry symbolic meaning. In virtually every culture, they represent life, growth, stability, connection. Family trees map genealogy. The tree of life appears in art and religion worldwide, symbolizing interconnection of all living things. Trees symbolize strength and endurance. The oak particularly, resistant to storms, living centuries. Willows represent flexibility and resilience, bending in wind rather than breaking. Evergreens symbolize immortality and eternal life, maintaining green needles when deciduous trees stand bare, hence their use in winter celebrations. Different species carry specific meanings. Olive trees symbolize peace. Palms represent victory and triumph. Cherry blossoms in Japan symbolize life's transience, beautiful but brief. Bamboo represents integrity and resilience. In Chinese culture, trees mark important events, planting trees for births, memorializing deaths with memorial trees. They're used to commemorate events, their long lives serving as living monuments. Trees represent knowledge. Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, Newton's apple tree. They're liminal figures, rooted in earth, but reaching towards sky, bridging terrestrial and celestial realms. These symbolic meanings shape how we value and treat forests. They're not just resources, they're embedded in cultural identity, spiritual practice, artistic expression. Protecting forests means protecting these symbolic dimensions, as well as ecological functions. The meanings we attach to trees reveal our recognition that they're special, worthy of respect and preservation. The life hidden beneath the soil. Beneath the visible forest lies another forest, an underground realm of roots, fungi, and countless organisms. This hidden world is as complex and active as the canopy above. Tree roots extend far beyond the trunk, sometimes spreading over areas larger than the crown. They interweave with roots of other trees, competing for water and nutrients, but also sometimes grafting together, forming connections through which resources can flow. The soil itself teems with life. A single teaspoon contains billions of bacteria, meters of fungal hyphae, protozoa, nematodes, and more. These microorganisms break down organic matter, releasing nutrients that plants absorb. They form complex food webs, bacteria consumed by protozoa, protozoa by nematodes, nematodes by other predators. Fungi are particularly important. Mycorrhizal fungi partner with most trees, forming sheaths around roots or penetrating root cells, trading soil nutrients for plant sugars. Saprophytic fungi decompose dead material, recycling nutrients. The fungal network extends through the soil, connecting trees, transporting nutrients and chemical signals. Larger organisms inhabit the soil too. Earthworms, millipedes, beetle larvae, burrowing mammals. They mix soil layers, break down organic matter, create channels that allow air and water penetration. The soil is not inert substrate, it's a living system, and forest health depends on its vitality. The microbes that feed the roots. Trees can't directly access most nutrients in soil. They depend on microorganisms to make nutrients available. Nitrogen, essential for proteins and DNA, exists primarily as atmospheric nitrogen gas. Certain bacteria can fix this nitrogen, converting it to forms plants can use. Some nitrogen-fixing bacteria live freely in soil. Others form partnerships with specific plants, living in root nodules, where they fix nitrogen in exchange for carbohydrates. While this partnership is most famous in legumes, some trees also host nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Phosphorus, another essential nutrient, often exists in forms chemically bound in soil minerals. Mycorrhizal fungi secrete acids that dissolve these minerals, releasing phosphorus. The fungi deliver to tree roots. Other microbes produce enzymes that break down organic matter, releasing nitrogen, phosphorus, and other nutrients locked in dead leaves and wood. Trees essentially farm these microorganisms, providing them with sugars and creating conditions that favor beneficial species. The rhizosphere, the zone around roots, has distinctive microbial communities, different from bulk soil. Trees influence these communities through root exudates, chemicals released from roots that attract beneficial microbes and repel harmful ones. The relationship is sophisticated, evolved over millions of years. Trees don't grow alone. They're partners with vast communities of microorganisms, completely dependent on their microscopic allies for survival. The earthworms that shape the land. Earthworms are ecosystem engineers, organisms whose activities physically shape their environment. As they burrow through soil, they create channels that allow air and water penetration, improving soil structure. They consume organic matter, dead leaves, decaying roots, grinding it in their gizzards and excreting nutrient-rich castings that are much more available to plants than the original material. In some forests, earthworms process the entire leaf litter layer annually, pulling leaves underground and incorporating them into soil. Their burrows can extend meters deep, bringing deep nutrients toward the surface while carrying organic matter down. The channels they create persist even after worms die, providing drainage and allowing root penetration. Earthworms influence which plants can grow. Their activity can change soil pH, structure, and nutrient availability, favoring some species over others. Interestingly, Many northern forests historically lacked earthworms. Glaciers had eliminated them, and they never recolonized naturally. European earthworms introduced by human activity are now spreading through these forests, dramatically changing soil conditions and forest floor ecology. Some native species are declining as earthworms consume the leaf litter layer they depend on. It demonstrates that even beneficial organisms can become disruptive when introduced to ecosystems that evolved without them. Earthworms remind us that soil is alive, that the underground community is as important as what grows above, and that changes to soil life ripple through entire ecosystems. The animals that depend on the forest. Forests support enormous diversity of animals, each adapted to exploit specific resources. Many animals are specialists, dependent on particular forest types or conditions. Spotted owls need old-growth forests, with large hollow trees for nesting. Woodland caribou require old lichens that grow only on ancient trees. Marbled murrelets, seabirds, nest exclusively on large branches in coastal old-growth forests, flying dozens of kilometers inland from ocean fishing grounds. Others are generalists, thriving in various forest types. White-tailed deer, raccoons, and coyotes adapt to forests from Florida to Canada. Many animals depend on forest edges or diversity of habitats. Grouse need both dense forest for cover and open areas for feeding. The relationship often extends beyond simple habitat provision. Many animals are seed dispersers, squirrels caching nuts, birds consuming and excreting seeds, bears carrying berries in their digestive systems. These animals are essential for tree reproduction, moving seeds to new locations, sometimes planting them, as squirrels do when they forget cache locations. Other animals are pollinators, visiting flowers and transferring pollen. Some are predators or browsers that control populations and prevent any single species from dominating. Remove these animals and forest dynamics change. Without seed dispersers, trees can't colonize new areas. Without predators, herbivores may overgraze. Forests and their animal inhabitants co-evolved, shaping each other, creating interdependencies that make them inseparable. The great circle of life. Among trees: birth, growth, reproduction, death. Trees follow this cycle like all living things. But across time spans that dwarf human lives, a tree begins as a seed, containing an embryonic plant and food reserves. Most seeds never germinate, eaten by animals, landing in unfavorable locations, or simply unlucky. Those that do germinate face enormous mortality. Seedlings compete for light, water, and nutrients. Most die within their first year. Survivors grow slowly at first, establishing root systems. If they reach the sapling stage, their chances improve, but they may wait decades for an opportunity. A gap in the canopy when an older tree falls. Then comes a race, multiple saplings competing to fill that gap. The winner grows rapidly, reaching the canopy. Now established, the tree may live for centuries, growing steadily, surviving storms and droughts. Eventually, it reproduces, producing seeds that start the cycle anew. After decades or centuries, decline begins. Growth slows, branches die back. Insects and fungi attack weakened trees. Finally, death, sometimes sudden through wind throw or lightning, often gradual through decay. But death isn't the end. The dead tree provides habitat, cavities for nesting, bark for insects, eventual food for decomposers. As it falls and decays, it returns nutrients to soil, sometimes becoming a nurse log where new seedlings sprout. The circle completes. Death feeds life. The forest persists through individual trees, dying and being replaced. The pollinators and the flowers. Though less famous than pollination in meadows and gardens, forest pollination is crucial. Many trees are wind-pollinated. Oaks, beeches, pines, producing enormous quantities of pollen that drifts on air currents. It's inefficient but effective when many trees of the same species grow together. Other trees rely on animals. Bees visit willow catkins, one of spring's first pollen sources. Beetles pollinate magnolias, ancient trees that evolved before bees existed, adapted to beetle pollination. Hummingbirds visit flowering shrubs in forest understories. Moths pollinate night-blooming trees and shrubs. Bats pollinate some tropical trees, including species that flower directly on trunks, cauliflory, making flowers accessible to flying mammals. The mutualism benefits both partners. Trees gain reproduction, pollinators gain food. Some relationships are specific. Certain fig wasps pollinate only certain fig species, and those figs can be pollinated by nothing else. These tight dependencies evolve over millions of years, but create vulnerability. Lose the pollinator, and the plant can't reproduce. Lose the plant and the pollinator starves. Most forest pollination relationships are looser, with multiple species visiting flowers, and flowers visited by multiple species. This generalization provides resilience, but even generalist pollinators are declining in many regions, raising concerns about forest reproduction. Pollination is invisible infrastructure, easily overlooked, but essential. Without it, many forests couldn't persist across generations. The fruits that feed the forest. After pollination comes fruiting, trees producing packages of seeds, surrounded by nutritious flesh, specifically to attract animals that will disperse them. The variety is remarkable. Berries in countless forms: strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, elderberries, each adapted to different dispersers. Stone fruits, cherries, plums, with hard seeds that protect the embryo from digestion. Palms, apples, pears, with seeds in a core. Nuts, acorns, hickories, walnuts, rich in fats and proteins, targeted at different animals. Some fruits are tiny, berries the size of peppercorns. Others are enormous: breadfruit, jackfruit, durian. Some are sweet, some sour, some aromatic, some bland. Colors signal ripeness: green when unripe and unpalatable, turning red, blue, black, or yellow when seeds are ready. Animals have evolved to recognize these signals, timing their feeding to tree reproduction cycles. Many forests experience massed years, synchronized fruiting, when most trees of a species produce abundant fruit simultaneously. This satiation strategy ensures that even though animals consume heavily, they can't eat everything, leaving some seeds to germinate. Fruiting requires enormous energy investment. A mature oak might produce thousands of acorns. Most will be eaten, but a few will sprout, and that's sufficient. The fruits feeding forest animals are deliberate creations, evolved structures designed to manipulate animals into serving as unwitting seed distribution networks. The role of decay and renewal. Death and decay are essential to forest life. When a tree falls, it doesn't disappear. It transforms, slowly returning its accumulated matter to the ecosystem. The process begins immediately. Bark beetles and wood-boring insects colonize dead wood, tunneling through it. Fungi arrive, their spores always present, waiting for opportunity. They digest wood, breaking down lignin and cellulose that few organisms can process. As decay progresses, the wood softens, allowing other organisms to enter. Termites in tropical forests, carpenter ants in temperate regions, larvae of countless beetle species, all consume decaying wood. Salamanders, small mammals, and reptiles shelter in rotting logs. Mosses and ferns colonize the surface. Eventually, perhaps decades after falling, the log becomes nurse log, a raised bed where tree seedlings germinate, their roots growing down through the decaying wood into soil below. Walk through an old forest, and you'll see this everywhere. Young trees growing in lines marking where nurse logs once lay. Rows of trees rooted in their ancestors' remains. The nutrients in that original tree, accumulated over its lifetime, return to circulation. Nothing is wasted. Death is not an ending, but a transformation. Matter and energy changing form, continuing to support life. Decay and growth are twin processes, inseparable, driving forest renewal. The fallen trees that create life. A fallen tree becomes a universe. In its first months after falling, the bark remains intact, and wood is still firm. Bark-dwelling insects and their predators colonize it. Fungi begin internal digestion, spreading through the wood in networks of mycelium. Within a year, the bark loosens, creating spaces where salamanders, centipedes, and spiders shelter. Moisture collects in crevices, creating microhabitats. Small ferns sprout. By year 5, the log is softer, spongy in places. Holes appear where branches rotted. These become nest sites. Woodpeckers excavate cavities, later used by owls, squirrels, and bats. Moss carpets the upper surface. The log retains moisture like a sponge, staying damp even when surrounding soil dries. Tree seedlings sprout on top, their roots penetrating downward. Nurse logs provide elevated germination sites above the shaded forest floor and supply nutrients as the wood decays. By year 20, the log is collapsing, its internal structure breaking down. It's a long mound on the forest floor, soft enough that footsteps sink into it. By year 50, it's barely recognizable, a gentle rise covered in soil and plants. The trees rooted in it are mature now, their roots extending into the ground where their nurse log once lay. By year 100, even the rise has flattened. The log is gone, completely recycled, but the trees it nurtured remain as its legacy.